Point Cannon Brace is a funny exotic because when it was introduced back in Season 18, this exotic was actually insane, even breaking Crucible by granting Guardians one-hit melees with no charge up. This exotic got quickly taken off its high horse with a fast nerf possibly making it the worst exotic in Destiny for the last 3 seasons. Well, in Season 21, all that has changed because it got a rework granting a new perk that is honestly one of the most fun times I've had on the Titan class. Today's build will be taking advantage of this new perk and taking it to the extreme by giving your right hand the power of Zeus himself while having near infinite uptime. Hi, my name is Trig, and let's get into the first build of Season 21. Now I'd like to start this build off with a disclaimer. This isn't the best build of Destiny. There are definitely better Arc Titan builds currently in the game, such as Heart of Inmost Light and Armamentarium with pulse grenades. Hey, I have a video on the second one if you would like to check it out. This build is just all around a fun build to run around with that will jolt literally everything and can work in some endgame activities, but I'm not so sure it can work in stuff like Grandmasters. Of course, only time will tell as we will be getting them here in a few weeks. Now that we have that out of the way, let's jump into the build. To start off, of course, we have Point Cannon Brace with its new rework that can devastate rooms with lightning strikes, clearing them in seconds. This perk reads, while using Thunderclap, targets near you will suffer lightning strikes and become jolted. While amplified, these strikes will do more damage. So basically, while you're charging up your melee and using on a bigger health add, everything around you will get hit by a lightning strike and either die or be jolted so that they can chain lightning to other targets while they take damage. This exotic will also grant melee energy on Thunderclap hits, making it incredibly strong for consistent uptime on the melee ability. Running through the abilities really fast, we have Thunderclap as our melee because it is the only melee that works with our exotic. Pulse Grenade because they're just a solid nade option and that they can increase our ability uptime when paired with one of our aspects. Thruster because it has the shortest cooldown when it comes to class abilities, and last but not least, our super Thunder Crash. Thunder Crash is just here because it is consistent damage and a really quick source of damage. Fist of Havoc did get a ton of buffs this season, but I haven't personally tested those changes to see if I would prefer it over Thunder Crash itself. At the end of the day, I'm sure they are comparable with Thunder Crash just being a more DPS option because of the quicker cast time. Headed to the aspects now, our first one is Touch of Thunder. All this aspect does is increase the potency of our Arc Grenade, specifically with Pulse Grenade granting it the ability to generate Ionic Traces whenever the Pulse Grenade ticks for damage. Ionic Traces are a very strong thing in Arc in general, as they provide a crazy 12.5% ability energy to any of our 3 abilities on cooldown. This helps so much when you take a look at our fragments to see how many traces we will generate just by playing the game. Moving to our second and last aspect, it is Knockout. This aspect basically gives our melee the ability to heal us whenever defeating a target with it. Additionally, we'll get increased damage and range whenever we are critically wounded or break a combatant shield shortly before using the melee. The aspect synergize perfectly with our build, but something that does elevate the build more is our 4 fragments paired with this build. Starting off with the first fragment, we have Spark of Shock, which makes it so our grenade jolts targets, making it just a little bit better at clearing rooms, but also giving it the ability to pair perfectly with the next fragment, Spark of Ions. This fragment just generates Ionic Traces whenever a jolted target is defeated on a 10-second cooldown, basically making it so whenever our melee or grenade defeat a target, that target will give us ability energy to both of our abilities. Next up, we have Spark of Amplitude, so that whenever we defeat a group of adds while amplified, we will generate an Orb of Power on a 10-second cooldown. While it doesn't sound like much, Orbs of Power help tremendously when it comes to what mods we are using on the build. But before we get to that, we have one last fragment. Spark of Resistance isn't the most flashy fragment, but it does give us a crazy 25% damage resist whenever 3 or more enemies are nearby. This is something you won't notice too much while playing, but trust me, it will keep you alive more times than you will realize. Our weapons for the build are very simple, as you don't really need to use anything specifically. Use whatever your heart desires. It's a free range build. This build can do almost anything with just its abilities alone, so use whatever you want. For higher end gameplay, I would recommend using something with Volt Shot on a hand cannon particularly, either being Posterity or Nation of Beast, because it is our unstoppable hand cannon this season. And then if you pair it with Arbalist, you will have anti-barrier covered at that point. And then, so since you have Arbalist and your hand cannon, you have 2 different champions covered, but with Jolt specifically, so from your melee or from your grenade, you will be stunning Overload champions with Jolt. So then you'll have all 3 champions covered, but that's just my recommendation. Again, use whatever you want. The build does most of the build's like duties from the grenade and melee. I just want to take a second here to ask you all to subscribe to the channel if you are enjoying the content. I upload builds and short form content, so if this is what you want to see, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. There's a bunch of tips on the channel. I just uploaded a weapon that is very, very good in the dungeon if you guys want to check it out in the top right. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a good day. I appreciate you all. Moving over to the mods, it's a pretty simple build. We are using the 2 new mods in the game, so keep a lookout for those. They are very helpful for the build. So to start off, we have our orb generation mods, because that's what build crafting is all around now, is grabbing orbs of power. We have Harmonic Siphon in our helmet to give us orbs of power whenever we get rapid arc weapon final blows. We have Heavy Handed so that we get orbs of power whenever we get a powered melee kill, and Reaper so we get whenever we pop Thruster and get a kill shortly after, we will also get an orb of power. To help us out getting armor charges, we have Elemental Charge, so whenever we grab 2 Ionic Traces, we will get an armor charge. This might be better with stacks on stacks, so stacks on stacks just makes it so whenever you grab an orb, you get 2 armor charges instead of 1. I don't know which is better, I just wanted to use the new mod, and that's why this is here. But if you think stacks on stacks would be better, feel free to replace it. The other new mod is Powerful Attraction, so whenever we use Thruster, we'll grab all the orbs of power in a small vicinity around us. Helpful, so you don't have to go hunt those down, and a very nice addition to the build. Charged Up is also in our chest piece, so that we can carry 4 armor charges instead of the 3 that is typically max. We're going to be using these armor charges with melee kickstart to get roughly 45% of our melee back. This does stack with point cannon brace, so you get a bunch of melee energy every time you use thunder strike on something else. Finishing off the legs, we have 2 pickup mods for orbs of power. So Invigoration, whenever we pick up an orb of power, we get a little bit of melee energy back. This does also stack with our melee kickstart and our point cannon, so helping out with getting our melee energy up and at all times. And then we have Recuperation, so whenever we grab an orb of power, we get a bunch of health. Knockout does heal us whenever we get a knockout kill, or a melee kill, but this is just extra help for whenever you're running around grabbing orbs, trying to just go to the next fight. Very, very, very nice. Finishing off the class item, we have Outrage, so that whenever we use Thruster, we get a little bit of melee energy back too, stacking with all the rest of our melee energy aspects of the build, and very helpful. Last 2 mods in our helmet are Hands-On and Ashes to Assets, so whenever we use our abilities, we get a little bit of super energy back to use our Thunder Crash a little bit more. Finish off your chest piece with resist mods, whatever you want. I just have an arc and avoid resist in mind just because I was doing the dungeon or something. I forgot why I have these in, but this is what I specifically have in at this current moment in time. Use the rest of your points to fill in with stat mods. Stats I would prioritize with the build is Resilience, Strength, and then Discipline in that order. So Resilience is helpful for damage resist, Strength is good for having more thunderclaps up, and Discipline's good for your grenades because it's an ability spam build. Moving into the artifact has a bunch of very helpful background perks that you can utilize. It's nothing like game changing, so don't worry about it too hard, but they are very nice pickups if you do have the points to grab them with. The only one in the second column I'd recommend grabbing is the melee discount mod. Very, very helpful because you can squeeze all the mods that we have on the build onto your gear. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to. Going to the third column, Electric Armor, which is supposed to be named Amped Up. Amped Up and Electric Armor are name swapped at the moment, so later in the season you'll probably see them name swapped, but at this current moment in time, as this is being uploaded, it is called Electric Armor, and it says stay amplified longer while you have an arc subclass equipped. This is helpful because instead of a 15-second amplified, you'll have a 20-second. Very, very nice. And then Thunderous Retort gives your Thunder Crash a little bit extra damage while you're amplified. They pair perfectly together, and they also pair next with Amped Up, which again, it's going to be name swapped later in the season. Amped Up states that you get increased damage resist while amplified. This is a 25% damage resist. It does stack with Spark of Resistance and your increased resilience, giving you like a very high damage resist number, and mixed in with Knockout and the Recuperation mod, you basically can never die if you play the build correctly. Counter charge is very helpful. Whenever you stun a champion, you get an armor charge, which is what the build's centered around, is armor charges to get your abilities back. Lightning strikes twice in the final column is helpful because you get more arc grenade energy. Isn't the most noticeable perk in the game, but it is very helpful in the background, and you will notice that you get an extra grenade from here and there because of this perk. Shock and Awe is also a good artifact perk. It's not the most noticeable either, as it just summons 1 lightning strike onto a target you killed while you are amplified, and it will jolt everything around it. This only really is noticeable when enemies are clumped together, but when they're separated, you won't see it too often. But like a group of Thrall, you'll just disintegrate with it, and it can help from time to time in the right scenario. The gameplay loop for this build is pretty simple, as it's just ability spam. You want to use your melee as much as possible, more than your grenade. Your grenade will come back fast too, but not as fast as your melee. So if you have both abilities up, prioritize your melee if you can. Far away, of course, through your pulse, harder content. Pulse is obviously safer. But yeah, it's just literally use your melee. You practically get a whole nother melee back. Your grenade can generate more ability uptime for your melee. It's all centered around just spamming it as much as possible. You can charge it up if you want for a little extra damage, but I was just I would normally just touch it, like tap it, and just let it go off, because the lightning strikes are the main point of the damage in my opinion. Charging it up does do a good amount of damage, but it takes too long and leaves you vulnerable for too long. For champions, this build is pretty simple, as you have unstoppable and anti with your weapons, so jolting is your only way to stun Overload, and it's pretty simple, as it's just use your ability, like straight up. If you melee a target, like use your Thunderclap, either at 0 value or 100 value, it will jolt. If you use your grenade, it'll jolt. If you have Volt Shot on your weapon and you shoot a champion, it'll jolt. And it'll apply them with jolt. It's not just a one-time stun, it's a damage over time effect, and the longer you do it, the more you shoot them, the more they'll jolt, and they won't heal as long as they have that status effect. Very simple gameplay loop, but just a few things to note. If you guys enjoyed this video, I would appreciate a like, a subscribe if you want to see more like this, and yeah, I hope you guys have a good day. Enjoy the build. Let me know what you think down below. See ya.